Yes, it's a very good afternoon. Welcome to your great radio station, Galaxy Radio, Radio Flora. And today I've got a very exciting guest. I've got Jesus Torres uh, from the new GOP. And he's joining me this afternoon to discuss on a very exciting discussion. Jay Torres, how are you doing?
Hey, how's it going there, Taffy? I'm
Mhm.
doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, compliments of the new season.
Yes, yes, 2026. We are here.
Yeah, we're here. It starts off on a very exciting note.
There's always something going on every which way you look, I suppose.
Uh, So, Jay Torres, let's talk about what just recently happened, the issue of Venezuela. My first question to you is, what's your comment on what happened in Venezuela?
Yeah, a lot of dynamic events have occurred, obviously, with Venezuela.
Mm,
There are our neighbor down to the south. And, quite honestly, it's one of the things that I support is the curtailment and the end of these drugs that are coming into our country. And I think a lot of countries deal with this. A it's not an issue that solely the United States deals with, but it's an issue that a lot of countries deal with. It's a
mhm,
international problem. Now with
mm,
Venezuela,
mhm,
one of the things as far as Venezuela is concerned is that it's more of a transitory country.
mm,
It's not one of the countries that actually fabricate and manufacture
mhm,
cocaine, but it's one of the high points, and maybe you even call it a staging area or a transiting area for
mm,
these drugs. Looking at the statistics, though, I see that only about 10% of the drugs that are entering the United States, as far as cocaine is concerned, originate from Venezuela. And so, we have to really look at and account for the other 90% of the
mm,
drugs
mhm.
that are coming into the United States.
Okay,
In regards to Venezuela, though, um, obviously, yeah, if they're a part of this whole network, then what happened to President Maduro, he had it coming.
okay. So, again, my question then comes to say, do you think US actions violated Venezuela's sovereignty?
And that's a pretty tricky question there, Taffy.
Hmm.
But if you look at the report, number one, according to the documentation that I saw that was furnished there on the internet, it looked like there was an arraignment that had occurred where they found President Nicolás Maduro guilty, at least two charges involving trafficking narcotics into our country, and also utilizing his cabinet and uh, his powers to allow and facilitate the transit of these drugs into our country. Um, One of the things that was mentioned as far as that ordeal is concerned was that that our military forces worked in conjunction with a law enforcement, local law enforcement. And so from the legal standpoint, they were simply exercising that warrant, I guess, for his arrest. And so it's kind of interesting to have that. Imagine being on a UH helicopter or a CH-46 helicopter with all these military folks, and you got one sole law enforcement person, a cop basically, or a detective, whatever the case might be, on board, just so they can feel that they can check the box and say, yes, we had law enforcement there, and they were simply exercising their right to go and
Okay,
present this warrant.
but the question now comes and says, it, so many commentators have said you cannot get in and remove a sitting head of state, you know, because Nicolas Maduro was a sitting head of state. It's no longer an issue of criminal charges against him, but he was a sitting head of state, which means
Right.
this can happen to any other country around the world. That if if Zimbabwe decides to say we want to arrest so and so, they can go and remove a sitting head of state. The sovereignty of a country is then compromised.
Yeah, I understand that. I think that there's a lot of moving parts to this. Obviously, with any military operation, it's not something they're going to go and post it before the operation occurs. and say, this is what we're going to do, and this is the reason why we're going to do it. With these sorts of operations, for me, I call it a snatch and grab.
Hmm.
The way it was done, it
Hmm.
was about 4.5 hours in its entirety. The four preceding hours were more about setting the stage for the extraction, and then maybe 30 minutes, boots on the ground with the forces going in there and obtaining or capturing the president and his wife. Um, Now, yeah, reciprocity, I guess we could probably expect that to some degree. But I think that once again, if you're a culprit and you're doing the wrong thing, and this has already been expressed to the president from President Trump. Um, President Trump gave him more than one opportunity to do the right thing, and for whatever reason, he chose to do otherwise.
Okay. So now the question then comes again and says, it seems this issue is not more about the criminal, the drugs, narcotic issue. It's more about because Venezuela's got the oil. It seems like America is more interested in the oil that Venezuela possesses. It's more about the oil and not about the criminal charges. So it's about America wanting to access the oil that Venezuela has. Or how would
Right.
you respond to that?
No, I mean, as an individual, as a citizen of the United States,
Hmm.
um, it doesn't sit well with me.
Hmm.
Number one, I do support uh, removing Nicolás Maduro off the chessboard, so to speak, as
Hmm.
far as his involvement with all that he's done regarding drugs.
Hmm.
As a president of the United States, and for myself as a former presidential candidate,
Hmm.
and perhaps even a hopeful for 2028, I mean, our responsibility is to go and take care of the welfare of our citizens,
Hmm.
and if that also includes uh, foreign and domestic, right? All these things that we have to contend with.
Hmm.
And so if you're a sitting president and you're inundated with all these drugs entering your country, and you've reached out and you've expressed to the country in which it's emanating from, and they're not willing to go and play nice and handle that situation, then, at some point you have to do what you have to do. I mean, it's not like we're losing hundreds of people. We're losing tens of
Hmm.
thousands of people.
But
And so someone has to pay the price. And
no, but the
now, as
question,
far as Mhm.
the question around this whole issue, the question is saying this issue is not about the drugs; it's about the oil that Venezuela has. You see,
Right.
because a lot of commentators and even a lot of analysts actually would say, no, it's about the oil that Venezuela has that America wants.
Yeah, and
Mm.
I do not support, as far as the new GOP and
Mhm.
the new political party that I am bringing forth and presenting to the American people to support and actually create. Because right now we're actually in the creating stage
Mm.
of a brand new political party, the new government of the people. Our viewpoint and our standpoint, my standpoint, as
Mm.
far as that is concerned, is that we will not support. Uh, we would not go in that direction, quite frankly. We would not go in and take advantage of a country and their resources, because it's not the right thing to do. It's not our oil, it's their oil. And they have the largest oil reserves in the whole world. Um, the majority of our oil doesn't even come from Venezuela, it comes from Canada. And we know that most of the oil that's being sold from Venezuela goes to China. So, I mean, that brings, at some point, it may bring them and involve them into the picture as well. But as far as my standpoint is concerned, the new GOP would not, does not and will not support us going in and land grabbing or
Okay.
seizing oil that does not belong to us.
Okay. So just a follow-up question to that. If you look at the current political situation, because the America and Canada are not in the best of books at the current stage. So then America would rather go for the oil in Venezuela and also to stop Venezuela exporting this oil to China so that they can have this asset to themselves.
I think that number one, President Trump is not going to be president, longer than this second term, right?
Mm,
So
mm,
we have to start thinking, a world after Trump. And
mhm,
and so I take that out of the equation.
mhm,
I think that relationships between us and Canada and us and Mexico, by the way,
mhm,
could be fixed, and it should be fixed. We should have really, really strong
mhm,
bonds between
mhm,
our neighbors on our north and
mhm,
south fronts.
mhm,
If I were a sitting president and if I'm fortunate enough to gain that seat in 2028, then I would certainly strengthen those bonds between
mhm,
Canada and Mexico. So as far as that's concerned, it wouldn't be any issue. And it certainly wouldn't be something on my mind to go and seize oil from Venezuela or any other country for that matter,
mhm.
just so we can uh, be better posture, so to speak, when it comes to our energy. I suspect that the long-term goal that they're looking at is, energy independence
Mhm.
from Trump's perspective. They're looking not at 28, not even
Mhm.
2030, but even
Mhm.
2040 and what that looks like. And what
Mhm.
it appears right now economically,
Mhm.
I know from the economic standpoint, countries like India are the ones that are emerging, as well as China. And who knows if they continue on their
Mhm.
trajectory, they may even surpass us. Right now, we're number one.
Okay.
Trump wants to remain number one,
Mhm.
and I think this is one area where he believes that might help.
So in short, I was saying Venezuela is being treated like more of an asset than like a nation.
They're a sovereign country, and
Mhm.
from my standpoint, they will always be a sovereign country.
Mhm.
They've got a vice president right now, Dulce Rodriguez, and right now she's in a tight spot. But
Mhm.
there and all, we have international rules for a reason, right? And
Mhm.
so if she is the next in line and she's the head of state, then um, our administration should be working with her administration until they can figure out whether she's going to um, be the next head of state and resume the presidency of Venezuela,
Mhm.
or if there are other people that are maybe looking at taking that role for
Mhm.
the country.
Okay. Last night we heard President Trump speak in a press conference and he said America is going to rule Venezuela. So again, the vice president of Venezuela is taken over as the head of state, but America said it's going to rule Venezuela. And how's that going to happen in your own way? How what do you think? How is America going to rule Venezuela? But President Trump that's what he said last night in the press conference.
President Trump says a lot of things, and
Hmm.
sometimes when he says things, he says things just from the hip, so to speak. Now, he didn't say he was going to Venezuela. He said he was going to run Venezuela.
Mm,
But even with that being said,
mm,
I don't support it as a citizen of the United States. I don't support it as a former presidential candidate, and I certainly don't support it as a presidential hopeful.
mhm,
And as a matter of fact, I was just on live on Facebook just yesterday, just last night, as well as
mm,
Twitter, with our message to the American people, letting them know that this just to keep an eye on what's occurring now as it
mm,
unfolds, so we can get more information so far as what does run mean, because the United States is not in the business of running other countries. I
mhm,
don't support it.
mhm. Okay, now looking at this with what just happened in Venezuela yesterday, can't we connect these issues to the issues happening in Ukraine and also the issue of Taiwan? Because China tomorrow would say, if President Trump went on and took over Venezuela like what they did yesterday, so we might as well just take over Taiwan.
Yeah, but I mean, we're not going to go and compare apples to oranges. That's been a long-standing issue between Taiwan and the mainland China uh, under their um, under their agreement. And but as far as Ukraine is concerned and Venezuela is concerned, I see a couple of similarities there, which I also expressed yesterday.
Mhm,
And that has to do with the wealth of Venezuela as well as the wealth of Ukraine with their natural resources
mhm,
and the minerals, whatnot.
mhm,
You know that President Trump is already trying to, well, he's already placed some sort of provision
mhm,
within the peace arrangements or the peace talks between President Zelensky and President Putin regarding everything from a barrier
mm,
there, I guess a buffer zone,
mm.
as well as some of their natural resources in which we're interested in. I mean, that's going to place the United States in a better, I guess, foothold, so to speak, when it comes to some of the natural resources that we're looking, raw earth material, whatnot. But then again, it has to be amicable and it has to be something done out of respect, not where we're strong arming another country and forcing them to go and take this or leave it.
Okay. My other question now is how powerful do you think the United Nations is, considering that if you look at what has happened globally, it would involve the P5, the P5 group in the United Nations. And so how strong is the Security Council with the United Nations? Because even
Well,
if any countries to take America to the Security Council today, they'll just veto it. Just like what Russia did when the issue of Ukraine was taken to the Security Council. So how strong then is the United Nations, and what can be done to to give the United Nations more power?
Well, I think for one, looking at the past history and maybe even just the last 20 years, 2 decades worth of it regarding
Mm,
NATO and United Nations, I mean, they both exist for a reason. Most of them are post World War II remnants. I think they serve their purpose, but what I think that they're lacking is their follow-up and follow-through processes.
mm,
And what I mean by that is that yeah, they might push back on some triggers that are occurring like Ukraine, like also what was occurring with Israel and Palestine and things like that. And so there's a little bit of pushback from them, but they seem to be very, very slow on the draw when it comes to reacting and also enforcing what they've established.
mhm,
Um, when it comes to Palestine and Israel, in that case, with the ceasefire, it's already months have flown by and
mm,
people are still dying there. People are
mm,
still being attacked. People are
mm,
still losing their lives and they're still being,
mhm,
inundated, by attacks by Israeli forces,
mm,
whatnot. And so it just goes to show you that either there's a lack of
mm,
intestinal fortitude there
mm, mm,
at some level, or there's no one at the helm. There's no one making that call and saying, "Hey, you need to abide by the rules that we
mhm,
established."
mhm,
And if not, then folks that are in those organizations and they're not abiding by the rules, they simply need to be put out of the United Nations or put out of NATO. Because if they're not participating, they're not
mm,
taking heed to the warnings enacted by their
mm,
own agreements, then
mm,
it serves no purpose for them.
mhm,
And that's one of the reasons why President Trump was really, really upset
mm,
and was not really um, a strong player with those
mm,
organizations because they just didn't show any true leadership.
mhm,
What they need is new leadership. I don't know how long those folks been in those roles there in those organizations with NATO and UN. Um, but in addition to that, I think we need to start looking at other countries that could be allies
mm,
and beef up
mm,
NATO.
mm,
For me, if I were a sitting president, I certainly have hubs and regions
mm,
of countries
mm,
that would just stand up are ready to go and defend maybe a neighboring country.
mhm,
So if there was one country in the center being attacked, then all the countries that are around it, it
mm,
would basically trigger them to go and assist that country that's in need. And
mhm,
that would happen regionally. So that way you're not waiting for or relying upon assistance or response back from a country all the way in the West or down in the South or Southeast Asia,
mm.
wherever. We should have these communities of countries
Okay.
that have these ties and are ready to go and offset some of these plights that they have.
Okay. So with the event that just happened in Venezuela, what risks does it pose to smaller countries? Because I guess all the smaller countries right now seem to be at risk of m- most likely events like that happening in their own territories.
Well, I think in some respects it's a good thing that someone has rattled that tree, right? Someone has shaken that apple tree. Now the apples are falling.
Mm,
This is a really good wake up call to countries out there that are harming
mm,
citizens there in Germany. You
mhm,
know, they're citizens in Southeast Asia,
mhm.
citizens all around the world. That at some point, you know, someone is going to say enough is enough. And at this juncture, looks like, you know, our president, President Trump, who I don't agree with most of his actions and stances. In this instance, I do support, like I said, I do support them, you know, capturing President Maduro and shaking that tree. We've got a lot of other countries out there like Colombia. We've got that are, you know, creating these drugs. As a matter of fact, the majority of the drugs created in Colombia actually make it there to Europe. So you guys are really, really taking the brunt of most of these cocaine derivatives or whatnot. And then when it comes to fentanyl and all these other drugs, I mean, we need to go and deal with all. Getting lip service from a sitting president or prime minister saying they're going to do more to combat drugs is not enough these days, because that's what Maduro said. And guess what? You know, he was facilitating it. So words don't mean anything. Actions mean something.
Okay.
So
My
yeah.
follow-up question again will be to me, if most of the drugs are manufactured in Colombia, wouldn't you have thought that it's better to go to the source, unlike the transit point?
Um, the source, I mean, if wherever those drugs are coming from, I mean, they were obviously they reached Venezuela, you know, from Colombia. And so, I mean, that's where I guess our intelligence professionals were keeping an eye on these things, and so that's where we hit. And if I were a sitting president or of a country or whatnot,
Mhm,
that knows that they are also involved in this drug trafficking, whether it's Mexico or Colombia, then they need to stop, desist. Because I tell you what, if I were a sitting president, and if I do become sitting president 2028, that's high on my, you know, that's high on my list of things to do. And I will continue on that track. When it comes to drugs and human trafficking, um, they will certainly have a reason to be very, very leery about, you know, my run in my presidency.
mhm. So what should the US or the new GOP what what should the US or the new GOP do moving forward?
Moving forward, when it comes to this subject, as far as drugs is concerned, we
Mm,
need to go and focus on that other 90% I mentioned and alluded to earlier on. And in addition to that, we need, as a country, the United States, is to start educating our children, because we have to deal with the demand for the drug. We just can't simply stop the drugs in their tracks. We also have to go and work on the demand for the
mhm,
drugs. And, you know, we absorb a lot of drugs in our country.
mhm,
You know, we from cocaine is just one of them. I mean, you've got,
mhm,
I mean, growing up in, you know, the 80s, you had so many things to deal with. You had LSD, you
mhm,
had heroin, you had cocaine,
mhm,
crack in the 80s, you
mhm,
had the ecstasy, you have the different pills and that people
mhm,
are using in the clubs. It just goes on, and drugs are going to continue to evolve, whether you're
mhm,
huffing glue in a bag
mhm,
or shooting up heroin
mhm,
with a needle. There's always going to be some sort of
mhm,
drug that someone's going to create or get
mhm,
their hands on, that's going to give them that whatever sense that and feeling
mhm,
that they're wanting to escape, you know, life in general.
mhm,
But I think that education is something that the new GOP will focus on,
mhm.
as well as combating it. We have to go and burn the candle at both ends and attack it. We have
Okay.
to attack the head
Mhm,
and the tail.
mhm.
Education is key.
Okay. So I was talking to Jesus Torres, the new GOP, and he hopes to be a presidential candidate in 2028, right here on Radio Flora and Galaxy Radio. Jesus Torres, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And just what are your parting shots before we let you go?
Yes, I appreciate it, Taffy, once again coming on board your show, and to all the folks out there in Germany and all around the world. Take a look at what we have to offer. We need your support. My stance is there's no such thing as a 100% Republican or a 100% Democrat. Thus, that's the reason why I'm creating the new government of the people,
mm,
or you can call it the new GOP,
mm,
that's going to represent all mainstream Americans,
mm,
not just simply the red or the blue. And so look for us on the newgop.com.
mhm,
That's the newgop.com
mm,
on social media, on Facebook, and express your support, and also look forward to your comments.
mhm. Okay. Jay Torres, from me to you, wishing you all the best, and we'll keep calling you for more and more discussions.
Very well. Thank you so much, Taffy.